Ing the boarding pass, she slipped into my pocket. Airports make honesty optional. You can become whoever your boarding pass says you are for exactly the length of a gate change, and no one will argue as long as you keep moving with the river. That afternoon, the river was late, and so was I. My name is Leon. I write infrastructure audits for airlines that pretend efficiency is a personality. I was flying home after a week of polite lies in conference rooms and had promised myself I'd buy a sandwich I didn't have to apologize to my body for. Then she slipped a piece of card into my jacket pocket and changed the story. It happened in the security lane where strangers decide who they are by how they undress. She was ahead of me, hair twisted into a knot that looked like it had opinions, navy dress, flats you could flee in. When the tray swallowed her laptop, she turned, brushed past, and slid a boarding pass into my pocket with the precision of a magician returning a coin. She didn't look at me. But when she cleared the scanner, she waited by the Replaston benches, and when I joined her, she exhaled like it had been a close thing. "Please pretend you know me," she said, low and calm. "We're terribly late for a flight. You just picked up my pass and you're returning it at the lounge entrance." I checked the card. Name, Anna G. Gates, D17. Time, 17-something. Destination, my city. Airline, the one paying me to say their escalators love stairs. Our eyes met. Sea gray, impatient. Wedding band, thin, deliberate, not trembling, not innocent. "Why me?" I asked, even as my feet moved. "Because you look like the kind of man who says yes for complicated reasons," she said, walking fast enough to make the terminal behave. The lounge sat behind a frosted partition that thought it was exclusivity. At the podium, a woman with practiced warmth smiled at Anna, smiled at me, and made a decision about our relationship that required no input from us. "Together?" she asked. "Yes," Anna said without hesitating. "We're connecting." She turned to me for the first time like we were already inside a joke. "My pass." I held it out. The scanner kissed the QR code and chimed approval. Mine chimed next. We stepped into a world of smoked glass and free almonds. Her shoulders softened by a quarter-inch. "I'm sorry," she said. "If I had time to explain it properly, I wouldn't be doing it." "You have 2 minutes," I said. "Use them badly or well." She led me to a corner with a view of airplanes rehearsing grace. "My husband is on a different flight to the same city," she said. "He has asked an investigator to follow me to make sure the story I told him is the one he can live with. The investigator knows my gate. He doesn't know I have lounge access." She gestured at the pass. "He'll be looking for a woman in a navy dress boarding D17 alone. He will not look here, because the investigator assumes my guilty conscience can't afford free almonds." "Does your guilty conscience have a budget?" I asked. "It has a calendar," she said. "Today it prefers not to be written up by men who think ethics is a police dog." "What happens after the almonds?" I said. "I board," she said. "So do you. You sit 2 rows ahead of me and fall asleep with purpose. At baggage claim, we do not know each other. If my husband calls, you are the conversation I was having about de-icing delays." She could have been inventing a novel in real time or saving a life. I couldn't tell which. This is a thing airports do to me, make me believe everyone is both fleeing and arriving. "Why not tell him the truth?" I asked. "Because I've never been able to resist asking people with rings why they're at the terminal without their spouse." "The truth," she said, "is that I love a man who can't be in the same room with himself unless I'm there to tidy up. The other truth is that I stopped wanting that job." We sat. I pretended to check email. She pretended to taste the Sauvignon Blanc. 30 seconds later, a man with a clipboard face walked past the glass and scanned the room for a woman in a navy dress. He saw us and didn't see us. That is one way to define a marriage. The flight boarded like every flight boards, with people pretending their status is a character trait. I closed my eyes before takeoff and let the runway lift us. The seat belt sign chimed at 10,000 feet. The world became small again. I ordered water because I wanted to be smug about hydration. Half an hour in, a turbulence ripple made the cabin remember gravity. Anna reached for the armrest between us. Her fingers brushed my sleeve and retreated like cautious birds. I took the cue and pretended to be a surface you could lean against without paying later. She didn't lean. She folded her hands and stared at the wing, and in the reflection I saw the face of a woman who was trying to reboot her life midair without touching any of the buttons. When we landed, my phone buzzed with the bold honesty of a bank email. I checked it. Her name blinked up from the corner of the screen. Anna G. A payment notification. $50 to my personal by a service I only use for people I trust enough to lend money I don't have. Memo line, sandwich I owe you. I looked over 2 rows. She didn't turn. I smiled, not because of the money, but because the memo was proof she knew I'd be hungry afterward. At the carousel, we became strangers exactly as promised. My bag arrived with the posture of luggage that resents its job. I headed for the train. She melted into a car service with tinted windows. I thought that would be the end of the story, and the story thought so too, right up until my phone chimed again at 10 p.m. and the subject line said, "Your notes on the runway." I opened the email. It was addressed to someone else. In the body, an attachment. In the signature block, each line above held a date that had learned to be ashamed. My father always told me to never open something that wasn't mine unless it had my name on it. This did. Title, D17 Gate Logbook, PDF. Content, my audit notes from the airline safety run. Header, forwarded by Anna G. Original sender, the airline COO. Recipients, a city councilman, a developer, a consultant whose business card smelled like lawsuits. It was the kind of forward that was either a mistake or intent disguised as a mistake. I wrote back, wrong Leon. Then I wrote again, right Leon. Then, we should talk before other people do. She replied with a location that didn't belong to her life. The public atrium of a glass museum whose donors prefer that no one bleed on the floor. The next day, she sat under a chandelier that thought it was a philosophy. She wore gray this time and a smile that had been taught to behave. "I forwarded the wrong thing to the right man," she said before I could speak. "You just didn't know you were right yet." "Why me?" I said, again. "Because you asked the only question I trust," she said. "The one about why people tell the truth. Also, because my husband is applying for a rezoning, and your notes say the runway extension he promised isn't actually needed. The councilman will grant the variance if he can call it safety. I would prefer the river to be safer than the investors." "You're asking me to go to war with your marriage," I said. "I'm asking you to write something true with enough force it can't be converted into a speech," she said. "And I'm asking you to let me take the blame for forwarding it to the wrong people. I will say I thought it was for the Planning Commission. He will believe that mistake because it is exactly the kind he thinks women make." "Who is he?" I said, "when you're not in the room?" "A project manager with good hair," she said. "When I am, he thinks he's a myth." I didn't kiss her in the museum. You don't kiss women in museums unless you are willing to become art, and I wanted to remain a man with a laptop and a problem with dishonest infrastructure. We sat under the chandelier and wrote a letter to the Planning Commission that didn't mention husbands or wives, only asphalt, rainfall, flight patterns, and what residents look like when they're told their neighborhood needs saving from planes that aren't landing. Her husband, Theo, called me that night from a number that had the confident ring of a person who owns too many phones. "You're Leon," he said, tasting my syllables like a sommelier. "You write neat sentences." "Do you need one?" I asked. "I need you to remember who bought your ticket," he said. "If this goes badly, there will be consequences for the airline. If it goes well, there will be lunch." "Lunch is a consequence," I said. "I write what the runway taught me." "The runway taught you what my lobbyists told it," he said, and laughed. And I thought of clipped hedges and bracelets and men whose fun has never been cheap. The hearing was a performance in a room that gets rented by both tragedies and fundraisers. I wore the suit I save for situations where I need my shoulders to look like a respectable argument. Anna sat 2 rows behind me, hair down, mouth set, a small square earring that made a tiny private point. Theo took the microphone and made a show of reluctantly caring about safety. He said all the correct syllables in the correct order. Then the chair called my name. I spoke about seasonal wind and noise corridors, and how the runway extension wasn't actually a runway so much as an excuse for a lorry road. I didn't look back at her. I didn't look at him. I looked at the map projected on the screen and talked about a neighborhood becoming an off-ramp. The variance failed by 1 vote. Barely is sometimes everything. Theo shook my hand afterward and I wanted to go shower. Anna didn't approach me. That was wise. But an hour later my phone buzzed with a payment notification. $10 this time. Memo, water at the podium. I laughed out loud on a street that needed it. We didn't fall into bed that night. We fell into a pattern of meeting in neutral places where windows fog on purpose, a coffee shop whose owner knows how to keep his eyebrows to himself, a hotel bar with a genteel carpet, a bookstore that smells like certainty. We held ourselves with restraint that made heat behave responsibly. We kissed in intervals you could set a metronome to. I learned the tremor behind her right knee when she is nervous, and how to press a thumb at her wrist to persuade it into calm. She learned the spot below my jaw that tells me to stop pretending I don't want to live. 2 weeks later, the airline asked me to rewrite the report with friendlier language. I refused in the politest sentence I've ever written. They didn't fire me. They just stopped copying me on emails where plans get invented and then disowned. That's how you get erased in the city politely. Anna began sending me small payments with memo lines that didn't feel like money. Rain check for the bench by Gate D. Apology for making you complicit in ethics, late night risotto fantasy. I sent back a single cent with a note that said, "Buy yourself something irresponsible." She wrote, "Already did," and I knew the irresponsible thing was me. Then the investigator returned. He caught us in the reflection of a shop window, not kissing, not even touching, just laughing, a kind of laughing that feels like a decision. He raised a phone. I watched him frame us like he was choosing a picture for a story that hadn't been hired yet. The next day, Theo posted a photo with a caption about his wife of 10 years being his North Star. The investigator sent him the video minutes later. We found out because Theo forwarded it to Anna's sister and copied the family chat, which included a child's piano teacher who had the sense to send it to no one. Anna knocked on my door in the afternoon storm. She stood there with a suitcase and a posture that had stopped negotiating. I stepped aside. We didn't drink anything. We didn't speak much. We stood in my kitchen like 2 paragraphs that finally belonged next to each other. When I touched her, it was not theft. It was proof, and she gave it to me like a sentence written in a hand I had learned to read slowly. We were careful in ways that make platforms happy and adults calmer. We were uncareful in ways that make bodies remember kindness. Her breath on my neck was a new city. My name in her mouth was a runway that didn't need extending. After, she sat on the counter and kicked her heels against the cabinet and said, "I'm leaving him. Not for you, with you near me." That is exactly the level of honesty I both deserved and wanted. It didn't get cinematic. Theo did not show up with rage. He showed up with paperwork, the kind that makes your eyes feel skinned. He kept the house and the couch and the portrait that had lied to them both. She kept her grandmother's ring, which she started wearing on a chain because her hands were for the future again. I gave her the extra drawer in my kitchen. She put tea there. You can measure a life by where the tea is. A month later, we were back at the airport, a different terminal, no investigator. We moved through security like people who had stopped pretending shoes are metaphors. At the lounge desk, she slid her pass across the glass. The scanner chirped. The attendant smiled. We walked inside like we were allowed to. She hooked her arm through mine and said, "You owe me a sandwich." "I keep receipts," I said. We sat by the window, watched a plane take off into weather that couldn't make up its mind, and I realized airports still make honesty optional. We were choosing it anyway, two people with carry-ons and a promise that didn't need anyone's gate to open. We boarded when they called our group, not because we were important, but because we wanted to leave and arrive in the same sentence. When we touched down, my phone buzzed. Payment received, $50 memo in case of de-icing delays. I sent her one back for 51. Memo for everything else. She laughed in the taxi and put her head on my shoulder and fell asleep like someone who'd been awake since January. I kept quiet, which is something I'm learning to be as good at as speaking. The city leaned around us like a complicated apology. If you need a moral, buy a different book. I am a man who writes reports and found himself auditing a marriage he didn't sign up to inspect. She is a woman who used to lounge like a confessional and decided that honesty is a better perk than almonds. The runway stayed the size it should be. The plaza kept its trees. The councilman lost a donor and found a spine, which is not nothing. And when we pass a gate now, the river of people moving fast thinks we are just part of it. We are. That's the trick. The difference is we know which way we're going.